Media points to the stock market as proof of extreme prosperity, but for the middle class, this rising chart is a crushing weight. A generation ago, a single income could secure a home and a future. Today, that same dream requires $250,000 in debt just to enter the race. When every hour worked buys less than the year before, the finish line keeps moving. This constant erosion creates a persistent sense of being trapped, driving the quiet epidemic of anxiety and depression seen in every modern city. We blame partisan politics or bad luck, but these are symptoms. This societal decay is the inevitable result of a financial system operating exactly as it was designed to. Tony Yazbek watched his father build a life from scratch 3 times, only to have it taken away by the state. First in Lebanon, when the banks shuttered and the local currency evaporated. Years of hard work and personal discipline didn't matter. In Madagascar and Kuwait, the story repeated. Wealth wasn't lost to poor choices. It was actively confiscated by corrupt banking systems. These families followed every rule, only to watch their life savings erased to cover institutional failures. This reveals the hidden architecture of state-controlled money. When a government holds the ledger, your savings are merely an entry they can modify or delete at will. The system operates on a lie, that your compliance guarantees your security. In reality, the state uses the labor of its citizens as a buffer to absorb its own losses. The modern era of theft began in 1971. This was the moment the United States permanently divorced the dollar from the physical scarcity of gold. This triggered the Triffin dilemma, a mathematical trap for any nation issuing a global reserve currency. To satisfy the world's demand for dollars, the U.S. had to run massive deficits, effectively forced to hollow out its own domestic industry and middle class to keep the system liquid. This creates a system of economic time travel. The government prints money to fund current wars and bailouts, paying the bill by pulling prosperity away from the unborn. We are spending our children's resources without their consent. When money loses value, producers must cut corners to maintain margins. Since 1971, this drive for lower marginal costs has replaced nutrient-dense food with industrial oils and cheap fillers. The data confirms the result: skyrocketing rates of obesity and metabolic disease that track perfectly with the rise in national debt. Expanding the money supply is a theft of time that eventually destroys the health of the culture itself. It forces a society to devour its future just to survive the waste of the present. Political corruption cannot be fixed with more politics. Reclaiming stability requires a neutral, math-based operating system that sits outside the reach of any government. This new code is built on 3 rigid ethical pillars. You shall not inflate, you shall not censor, and you shall not confiscate. These rules are enforced by numbers so incomprehensibly massive they defy physical force. Bitcoin security relies entirely on the laws of mathematics. The legacy financial system requires the military and the threat of violence to maintain its value. To take a man's gold or land, the state simply needs to send enough soldiers. But physical violence is useless against a private key. Because a gun cannot solve an equation, this network provides the first absolute property rights in human history. After failing to ban or destroy the code, the legacy banking elite has pivoted. They are now attempting to absorb the movement they once mocked. Wall Street is repackaging sovereign assets into custodial cages like ETFs. They are selling the public a version of Bitcoin that trades convenience for control, stripping away the very features that make it a revolution. Handing a revolutionary asset back to the institutions that caused the 1971 crisis defeats the entire purpose of the technology. Institutional adoption is the trap that returns us to a system of permission. The greatest threat to financial sovereignty is our own desire for comfort. We are being tricked into walking back into the cage because it's easier than holding our own keys. True sovereignty is completely unforgiving. It removes the safety nets of the state and demands absolute personal competence in their place. There is immense power in the quiet act of self-custody. Writing 12 words on a piece of paper and keeping them offline is a direct, analog reclamation of power from the banking system. In a world built on systemic theft, taking direct ownership of your labor is the only way to avoid being used as a buffer for the next collapse. Our decisions today will dictate the world our children inherit. If we choose the ease of convenience over the work of responsibility, we ensure the next generation grows up in the exact same cage we are trying to escape.